Hello, everyone, and welcome back. First and foremost, I hope that everyone had a great Mother's Day. It's been a little bit. Today, we're going to be getting into a clip of the Joe Rogan podcast and his latest talk with Dr. Jordan Peterson as they discuss the Douglas Murray and Dave Smith debate. For those that are unaware, unfamiliar, it was just a debate about Hamas, Israel, Gaza, that kind of stuff. And if you haven't seen it, I'll leave a link to it down in the description below. But what's interesting about this Dr. Peterson clip is how he puts forward some notions that had a reaction that I didn't quite anticipate. I figured it'd be a good idea to check it out, form our perspective, and then give our thoughts. As always, if you've been appreciating the content, please consider subscribing as it does help a lot. I don't think there's much else to say, so without further ado.
Yes.
Right? Because I could come on here, I don't know if it would work, but I could come on here and I could try to show that I was smarter than Joe Rogan. Now, I've watched you, and that's a very difficult thing to pull off. But hypothetically, that could be my aim, and I could play gotcha questions, and I could lead you into places.
The problem is that wouldn't work because I'm willing to accept that you're smarter than me.
But that's not exactly the entire aim of that person. That person could be using that situation or that moment to appeal to their audience, regardless if you took it personal or not. And I think that that's kind of what Jordan Peterson's talking about. He's saying that how you can be used as a platform to appeal to their audience that might grow their audience regardless of your own personal input. Because obviously Joe Rogan's going to have that humble approach that to know, you know way more about this than me, and I'm willing to succeed and admit to you that that's the case. But if this person is trying to build their own malicious environment, you can see how that can be used in that way. I guess what that person can walk away from is saying, well, I didn't take it personal. I mean, whatever they're trying to do is whatever they're trying to do, but you're still allowing your platform to be used in that sense. And so how do you go about that?
Right.
But it's worsened with social media. And so they can play power games to enhance their reputational status falsely with no consequences. I think that virtualization has enabled the psychopaths. Like I'm seeing this come up on the right now. So imagine this. I've been working on a new theory of political psychopathology, and I like it quite a lot.
Is this where the term the woke right comes in?
Yeah, well, Lindsay is pointing at that, but he hasn't got the diagnosis exactly right. So it isn't woke. That's not the issue. What he's pointing.
Woke just lets you clarify in your head. Oh, it's like that.
Yeah.
It's this other extreme, and we don't know what to call it because it's coming from that side, and it can't be the same as this side, but it's similar to the extreme, not in the sense of ideal, but in the sense of intensity. It is the same level of extreme intensity being shown on the opposite side. Yeah,
but the problem is that argument is predicated on the claim that the ideas are the problem, like the woke ideas. But that's not the problem.
That's not what's going on.
The problem is that 4 to 5% of the population, cluster B, that's the DSM-5 terms, histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic, or they have dark tetrad trait. The question is, how do these people maneuver? And the answer is they go to where the power is and they adopt those ideas and they put themselves even on the forefront of that.
Right.
But the ideas are completely irrelevant.
Right.
All they're doing is proclaim moral virtue.
Yes.
Doesn't matter whether it's right or left or Christian or Jewish or Islam. They invade the idea space and then they use those ideas as false weapons to advance their narcissistic advantage.
Yes.
And so then you have the problem, and the right's going to face this more and more particularly.
I mean, what you're kind of discussing there is grifters, and the term that keeps popping up in the political landscape, like who can hop on this trend the fastest. You saw it a lot with the red pill stuff. You see a lot with any compassionate sentiment usually. I would argue that with the cluster B personality disorders, it's a lot more than 5%. Now, by the book, it's 5%. Yes. What I'm saying is how many people are going unnoticed and not diagnosed? Because the 5% is in essence of what is diagnosed. How many people out there that are seeking out these malicious games genuinely believe that there's something wrong with them? No, because that takes a lot of character development, sacrifice, or wisdom to be able to come to that avail that you have bad decisions that you're making and you're hurting people around you. And it takes a while for a lot of people to reach that point, a lot of people to reach a variation of maturity. And I think the reason why it's only 5% is because the psychopathic checklist, the measure to find out that kind of issue, is typically only given to those that are incarcerated. It's not given to people that are not incarcerated. So I found it I bet it would be an interesting outcome if we started giving psychopathic checklists to random people as an experiment at first, just to see, not even to diagnose them and not even to point at them and say, you need to go see someone now. Obviously not. No, but just to see, right? I'm curious, and I'm curious of that observance. And it goes back to the empathy notion, where if you have people that aren't in your agreement, they don't see you as people. They don't see you as people. This is something that I've said before. And if you ever wonder how people could attack you the way that they do, destroy you the way that they do, is because they don't see you as a person. And that's becoming more and more common in reference to people's association and socialization with technology. And it's something that I put forth in my latest video, is how technology is allowing the disconnect and disassociation from understanding that you're still talking to people, whether you agree or disagree with them. They're still a person. And I think that's lost on people. They'll still say you're a person and that you're a human being. But if you're not in their camp, you're in no camp and you're not a person. Therefore, you're deserving of bad in general. And I think that that's kind of where that comes from. And lastly, the cultivation that's existing on the right, because the right has a foundation now, it's not beaten to a corner like it used to be. Yeah, you're going to see some bad start populating from that. You're going to see some bad start arising from that because now it has a place to exist. And you got to keep in mind with these psychopathic types that only seek out power and attention and reward on the basis of using other people to get it. They don't care that that's what they look like. You can call them a psychopath. You can call them whatever you think is going to make you feel better, but it doesn't occur to them that that's what they're being and that's bad because they're getting too much reward for what they're currently pursuing. And if all they see and feel is their reward, they don't care what the hell you call them because they're going to keep being the duck that has to walk like a duck, talk like a duck, quacks like a duck, if it means that they can continue that reward. It's pointless trying to judge them until they find that out for themselves.
They were in powers.
Yes.
How do you identify the psychopathic parasites clothed in your clothing and waving your flags, but who are only in it for narcissistic benefit? You know, the people who studied the dark triad showed that the non-criminal psychopaths, so the fringe cases, are Machiavellian. They use their language to manipulate. They're narcissistic. They want unearned reputation. That's what a narcissist wants. And they're psychopathic, which makes them predators or parasites. Okay, that's pretty bad, those three things. But they had to expand the nomenclature after a while because they found that they were also sadistic. You develop a sufficiently bad view of your fellow man that their undeserved pain is a source of pleasure to you. And that's what's being enabled online.
Yeah.
That's that lack of empathy.
See, because we've evolved real specific mechanisms to keep such things under control in face-to-face interaction. They escape from that system of constraints and they have free reign. And they can find other people like them very rapidly. And so this is like, I can really see this starting to happen on the right. Like I've been tracking psychopathic behavior on the right for probably 4 years, something like that.
And I think that you're going to see this more often, especially if you're trying to become more aware about your affiliations. Now, the reason why psychopaths will continue to envelop and be an occurrence is because relational violence doesn't break law. You're not a criminal for relational violence. And a lot of people that know how to maneuver within the space, they know how to continue that reward and not get arrested for it. Because if they get arrested for it, then they know they're not going to be able to pursue what they're pursuing anymore. So they have to play a little bit of the moral game, especially and within realms of perspective. And another thing here is the fact that he got ridiculed for having this stance. You're providing a holistic picture. How can you say that you're affiliated with something, but you can't be critical of it? I think that you saw a lot of that on the left. You see it in both political landscapes, obviously. You see it with anything that people infuse their identity with, because now they're seeing it as an attack on them and not an attack of their affiliation, which is fine. I think that people can criticize a lot about what they're following and why they're following it. The second that becomes a problem, it's like, oh, because I decided to question the institution or I decided to question this orientation of thought, I'm the problem? No, why aren't you doing that as well? And why aren't you wise enough to be able to see the problems arising? Why aren't you wise enough to be able to predict the criticisms or weaknesses within admiring or your affiliation? I think you see it in reference to people's following for streamers. You got some really bad actors out there that are doing all kinds of things. They could kill somebody or sexually assault a minor or something like that, and their audience is going to find some way to alleviate the responsibility to make it seem like, oh, it was only once, or no, that's not true. That's not even what happened. It happened like this, even though it's the same thing. It's like, what are we doing? What's going on there? Why and how is it that we're that lost where we can't even criticize this thing we're affiliated with because it is in likeness with our identity? Because to criticize our affiliations is to criticize ourselves. And I think that that's what we're trying to avoid in that process.
Get myself in trouble right away, too.
Yeah, for sure.
Well,
this is a third real subject.
Well, so I watched your whole conversation with Douglas, and I thought you guys did a very credible job, all three of you, of navigating unbelievably choppy waters. So that's the first thing I'd like to say, because one of the things I was trying to figure out when I was watching that is, do I think I could have done a better job of any of you? And I certainly didn't walk away from it with that idea in mind.
I think that's a little humble, being that he's a trained mediator of sorts. Come on, Dr. Peterson. Yeah. It's not that Joe Rogan didn't do a bad job. I think Joe Rogan did exactly what he was supposed to do, allowing people to talk, being a middle stance of fairness, and then kind of putting forth what he believes in reference to the people he knows. For those I've seen it, you kind of know what I'm talking about, but yeah.
But then underneath all that, I thought there's a really unbelievably tricky problem here. And the issue is, how do you identify the psychopathic pretenders? And it's even worse now, and then make a barrier, right? Now, the right was calling for the left to do that for decades, and they didn't, and they couldn't. And the left is not good at drawing barriers, partly temperamentally. The right is somewhat
I mean, it's all about that compassionate tolerance. I think that was a huge issue. You just kept allowing things until you didn't know what to do with it anymore.
Better, but there's no shortage of monstrosity there. And so then the question is, how do you draw the line? And that's kind of what because I've been watching these right-wing, they're not right-wing, these psychopathic types manipulate the edge of the conservative movement for their own gain. And a lot of that's cloaked in anti-Semitic guise. There's plenty of anti-Semitism on the left too, by the way. So your curiosity and your desire for knowledge, this quest, you've let that guide you as a podcaster. And how do you know, given your radical increase in stature over the last 10 years, how do you know when your curiosity and even your skepticism about the fact that things aren't the way that people say they are, because that's certainly been demonstrated in the last 10 years. How should anyone decide what guardrails to put up? Like, what do you look for? Do you have a conceptual system worked out for that? Like,
how do I look for in terms of people to talk to?
Yeah, because you have this insanely immense platform. Yeah. And you're inviting people onto it. And, you said to Douglas, and I know this to be true, that you're not really thinking about the outcome exactly. You're thinking about, this is an interesting person to talk to, and I'd like to go on that
simple
quest.
In that way.
But then you have the additional conundrum.
I think that what he's really trying to gauge is, how do you not allow your platform to be used for the gain of someone else? Because you're never really sure of exactly who's trying to do what, who's trying to achieve what. And they might use that little window of interest that you have, that this might be a unique conversation, this might be a good conversation. And they might use that as their vehicle to ship their agenda, because you're going to be able to grant the platform that you have to this person so they can be that microphone. And because Joe Rogan he's not oblivious to it. I think oblivious is a bad understanding. I think he knows. I think it's more of an acceptable risk. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing. And gauging character is tough. It's something you can only really do with time, especially if they're very deceptive. You're going to have to really track that person's affiliations, their stances, their consistencies, and whether they've been inhuman or human throughout their tenure of their existence. Have they been able to show passion in the things that they have previously taken stances on? Are they someone that flip-flops? Are they someone that says one thing, but then they're an affiliate with something else? Like, you're going to be able to look at those kind of things and gauge it. But it can be tough. And it's dangerous with the political landscapes kind of creeping in and seeping into things.
Once you gain in reach and authority, how do you take great care that the people you're talking to aren't feeding a subculture, yeah, that's right, that hasn't got the proper aims. Like, I guess the legacy media probably worked that out by having people, mediators, right?
Stop things going from too far, obviously. So that way they can keep their platform looking somewhat acceptable.
Rely on the structures of authority in some sense to filter. And now we're in this helter-skelter world where everything is
The
up
legacy
for
media is
grabs.
the worst at that now.
Yeah, I know.
They're the worst
I
at
know.
that, which is fascinating.
So that was a clip of Joe Rogan and Dr. Peterson's conversation and how Dr. Peterson puts forth his notion of the full picture when it comes down to the right and what's going on to the right lately because of the foundation that they have. Now, the great thing that I admire about Dr. Peterson is regardless of his affiliation with being a conservative, being on the right, so to speak, he's more than willing to allow himself to be a light, to allow everybody to see the full picture for what it is. Now, being the light has its costs. Being the thing that exposes and allows vulnerability to exist has a cost. You're going to have a bunch of people that are going to want to swat that light out of existence. You're going to have a lot of people that want to kill that flame or kill that fire. And the one thing that I say to that, sure, you may have 1,000 people who want to come and swat that flame down, but you might have one out of those 1,000 that just want to sit around the fire to be warm and be enlightened with the truth that exists and be grateful for that illustration or whatever that person has to offer. And I think that that's where the worth comes into play, because we're getting into this weird space where regardless of what side of the fence you're on, you just can't criticize anything. Now, you already have one side destroying the other and the other side destroying each other. That already exists, but now there's like infighting. And there's infighting because extremes exist. And these extremes are existing on these sides. And boy, is there some nasty stuff cultivating in those extremes. The thing that I'm seeing as a problem here is people are gravitating towards affiliations without being people first. Now, here's a little bit of story time. I talked to someone recently about their newfound affiliation with Christianity. And as quick context about me and how I go about conversations that involve, some complex subjects at times, I just like to challenge how people think. It's not because I'm against what you're about, against you as a person, or against what you're standing for. I'm more interested in how you came to that thought process, and asking that kind of question will often bring us to various places, sometimes good or aggressive confrontational conversations. There's nothing wrong about religion, nothing wrong about pursuing Christianity. This isn't where the problem exists. The problem exists when applying opposing views or criticisms towards something like Christianity, not even because these were things that I believe, but simply as a form of preparedness. If you're going to try to teach this to others, becomes an attack on this person's identity in some way, shape, or form. And it ended up being a conversation about the person didn't see any reason as to understand the criticisms or weakness of his new affiliation, or at least the affiliation that he's been progressing towards. And I think that that's the common problem that you're seeing with a lot of people who's gauging these new affiliations. If you're going to be part of something, I think it's very wise to develop a form of yourself so you know where you stop and where this thing begins. Because you need a form of separation. You need to know where you are and where this thing in your life is. And if you don't know that, then it's very likely that you're not going to allow for any room of judgment on you or this thing, because it's one of the same. Or at least it feels like it is, because you never gauged that properly. And then if you're going to be a part of it, understand it enough to know the full picture of whatever you're affiliating with. Otherwise, you're allowing yourself to be accepting of the stuff that's left in the fog, the ignorance that you're not wanting to see or don't think it's relevant to see. I think if you're going to be a part of something and you're going to have it be as part of your belief systems, as an example, whether that's politics or religion, the two greatest conversations that you can have at a dinner table, I think it's wise to know, or at least predict, the criticisms and weaknesses of your affiliation, because it shows a level of mastery or knowledge and wisdom in reference to what you're pursuing. If you can't tell me the common criticisms of your affiliation, or you can't predict the criticisms of what you're in, it's highly likely that you don't know enough about what you're pursuing. It's highly likely that you don't know enough about what you're affiliated with. And I think in there is the problem. We have a lot of various examples where people are just lacking wisdom and then they're lacking the maturity to address that inadequacy. Let's be people first and then be a part of something. Whether it's because of death anxiety, because of various things, we just feel the need to just immediately jump into these forms of identity and allow this to be our entire existence without being a person first. And I think that was the whole purpose of growing up. And I think the kind of issue that you're going to come across is you're never going to be able to step outside of that to be able to criticize either yourself or the thing you're a part of if you don't develop that first. You see a lot of youth dive bombing into these political stances, and they're like, what else have they got going on in their life? And what kind of experience do you have to put that forward as your reason for existing? I think you have a lot about the world that you need to learn, and as well as about yourself, to be able to gauge that, because people are dying on all kinds of hills except for the one that counts, and that's themselves. Why isn't that at the forefront of their mind? Well, that requires a lot of complexity, and then being able to say that you're part of this group because this group has a history of meaning a lot. Well, that sounds better, and that's easier way in to find purpose. And I think there's a lot more to that than the very quick accesses that people are getting into nowadays. So the overarching point, keep the full picture. Regardless of politics, religion, regardless of affiliation, always look at the full picture. Always be willing to accrue more wisdom in whatever direction you're walking, because I think that's very important. This whole essence of people getting offended because you put forth a form of criticism. Making a criticism about an aspect of culture isn't a criticism on the person itself. People need to understand that. And if you don't understand the criticisms of your culture, then it's perhaps because you don't understand your culture. It's something to think about, and it's something to address, so that way you have a more fair and open-minded view of whatever you're a part of. And I think that's really where we become more as people. And I think that's more relevant here, because anything can be deserving of criticism, because nothing is perfect. Nothing. And that's okay. That's okay. It's okay not to be perfect. I think we're just so scared of judgment that we forgot that there's a difference between judgment and condemnation. And what we feel when we hear judgment is condemnation, not judgment. Judgment is necessary. Judgment can be very adequate. It can be very beneficial if we're willing to adhere to it or listen to it. And I think that we lose ourselves a little bit when we don't want to hear that at all, because basically we just lost another opportunity for us to create a greater view of whatever we're in. And the more we deny the full picture to exist, we're either going to be sensitive to the parts of the picture that we don't want to look at, or we're going to want to stop looking altogether. Either way, it's both ignorant as shit. And to hit on this whole woke thing, we got to remember that woke came from the idea of political awareness. It's not a blanket statement for anything we disagree with or anything liberal. We gotta come up with something new, because when we kind of degrade a little bit when we just say everything is this, let's package it as this because it's less complicated. I think there's a lot of nuance and problem in that label. And I think that the more we kind of divvy that out, so to speak, the more we'll start to see what's the actual problem there. Or at least that's my opinion. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. For anyone that has any questions, go ahead, hit me in the comments down below. But also let me know what you thought about that conversation, or even what you thought about the previous debate and how that kind of was handled. Either or, I don't really mind either way. As always, like or dislike. And as a quick note, I just recently dropped a whole ass video, our worst relationship technology. Go and check it out if you want. But at the end, I put forth a bit of a shout out towards hitting 1,000 subscribers, as well as people on Patreon. In summary, I guess I'll say is I don't really know what to do about the 1,000 subscriber thing. So you guys go ahead, let me know what you think we should do as to reaching that first holistic goal, as I'll definitely be looking forward to it. So thanks again, and I'll go ahead, see you next time.